Oh, Happy New Year to you too.
I hope you had a swell holiday season.
It was all right. It wasn't too bad. We have got into a bit of we've got a bit of a tournament going on. Me, Mr. Biggs, and my dad, because my dad and I recently taught him how to play dominoes.
Okay.
So he's played, I think, 2 games with us now. And now it's like my dad calls me and he's like, because before we were on opposite teams.
Yeah.
My dad was like, you can't be on the same team as him because you've got to have a domestic rivalry going on. So well, I'm planning on buying a set for us. Ooh. So we can practice, and I can't have him learning this game and starting to beat me. It can't happen. I have to,
especially when you taught him the game.
Yeah, I've been playing much longer than him, and I have to have some level of one up on him, basically. Yeah. So I'll be furious if he surpasses me and my abilities. But yeah, I keep telling him, I was like, one person you won't be able to beat is my gran. She is very good at it.
She's like as sly as a fox when it comes to dominoes.
Yeah. And if you're good at maths as well, then you're like, it works in your favour. And my gran's really good at maths. So, yeah, that's what's been going on over the holiday period.
You're probably quite unique there, because I feel like the entire world on Instagram has suddenly got into chess because of the Queen's Gambit.
Oh, I'm not even going to start with chess. I have no idea. That was not a game for me.
Was it? I swear we used to go to chess club.
Yeah, we did. Our form tutor was teaching us chess?
So it was, dear listeners, we were very bizarre at school. So that's a whole different conversation.
Our school was never expose.
But we were always told that we couldn't be inside sort of for lunchtime or break time. So Mim and I literally took up so many school clubs so we could be inside. That was kind of part of it. We were also odd, but it was definitely part of it was well, at least we can then be inside.
Yeah, so for those listeners, this is where Scarlett's passion for knitting really springs from.
I forgot we did it at school.
Yeah, and then
that was one of the clubs too.
Yeah, for a while, people were knitting on the bus. Wow, it's a different time. Yeah, so we did do stuff like that. I can't play chess. I'm not even going to try. It's really a game that you pick up if you want to look smart.
I think I can play superficial chess in terms of I know what all the pieces do, and I can read the board as it is.
Oh, I can't even do that.
But I can't preempt what the other person might do and think ahead. I'm very in the moment, which is literally the opposite of the way you need to play chess.
Yeah, that's kind of what you need with dominoes as well. You have to be able to count what is remaining, what dominoes haven't been put down and who's basically been passing on certain numbers, because then that's how you learn how to catch them out. That's how you can think ahead and be okay, well, I think they've got so and so. If they put that down, I can put this down. So I think with all those sorts of games, you have to have foresight to win. Yeah.
So I think we found our newest podcast is talking about board games and pastimes for very lockdown friendly thing.
Yeah. But the first part of our podcast is never about fashion.
I know. Well, that, shall we get it back on track to your fashion story? Your first one of the year.
My first one of the year. Okay, I'll start. So you've probably seen on social here and there, the North Face have collabed with Gucci. Have you seen the video, the collection? So there was a film made by Daniel Shay, and it's to kind of show us what this collaboration is going to be like. It's actually the first inter-brand collaboration that Alessandro Michele has done. Normally they do collaborations with other artists and individuals, but North Face is not new to this. They've done other things with other companies and brands. So yeah, it's it's an interesting one. I was doing a little bit of research on kind of like what this is about, and a YouTuber, made a good point of the idea of maybe luxury brands, as we've mentioned, like with Moncler Genius and things like that. These luxury brands partner with these performance wear brands that are specialized in, I don't know, extreme sports or outdoor sports and things like that, to kind of bring a sportswear element, a technical element to their designs. And I think because it's quite interesting that we are buying more into athleisure than ever, as we said, and it's become more of a luxury good.
Huge. Like, you can't go for a walk these days and not see like
those, they're called the Nupsy coats, those puffer ones.
Yeah, the puffer ones that like are quite short as well. Not the most practical, must I add. But I do like to be wrapped up like a raccoon. Head to toe, but you see them everywhere, like they're everywhere. Really, so it's a really clever collab.
Yeah, definitely. So that kind of idea of the future of technical performance wear and things, but also for Gucci, who is trying to like move into conscious, environmentally friendly practices. Some of the accessories in this collection is made from recycled materials. I think some like the boots and things. So yeah, it kind of makes sense, and embracing the great outdoors. But as you can imagine, if you haven't seen this video or any of the pieces, it's very 70s inspired. They take these like North Face silhouettes and like plaster them with these 70s patterns. Yeah, it is cool. I mean, I'm not a fan of the logo. Have you seen it?
I actually can't think of what it is off the top of my head.
So it's the typical the North Face logo, and then at the bottom it says Gucci, and it's like it continues that like arch continues into the Gucci colours. It's I'm not crazy about it, but I guess it's temporarily, isn't it?
And also, I guess as well, there's probably a reluctance to put like the GGs or like anything, like, do you know what, like there'll probably be some like branding or logo sort of reason as to why it has to be just a bit plain.
I don't know if it's that, because they do have they have a jacket in particular which is covered in the Gucci monogram, but the logo, I think they tried to be a bit whimsical. Yeah, it's not a massive deal, but anyway, it launches on the 4th, so it would already be out by the time we put this episode out, in Selfridges. And if you go on Gucci's website, they have like a raffle, so I don't think it's like first come first serve type of thing. I think you have to be like selected to get your hands on this collection, which makes it very exclusive. Yeah.
Fab.
Yeah. So what's yours?
So mine is, I've made my stance on trackies very clear, but I think I'm about to be a real convert. So I've been thinking this entire festive period how much I want a matching tracksuit.
Oh, you have to.
And like you said, it makes you look way less scruffy. It's something that you can wear in the house, but then like if you need to pop outside, like you look like you've made an effort. And I just think the time has come, and I just wanted to share it with everybody.
Welcome to Trackies Anonymous.
I just like, well, because like, you know, I got my Halloween costume thing, which had conveniently had some trackies.
Yeah.
And they are fab. Like, they are so, like, I don't know. I think trackies have changed a lot. Like, when we were kids, trackies were just, at one point it was synonymous with like chav culture and stuff like that. But also you never got like, just take, like, I don't know. The ones that I've got are relatively like sort of like tailored or tapered. So like they're not just like hugely like ridiculous. Whereas like when I was a kid, like they just used to be just not very great.
Yeah, I think that a lot of fashion thinking has gone into tracksuits now. Before it was kind of like just a few options
like
out there, but now now there's so many different options out there, so many cuts, colors, that there's something out there for everyone. But like, you can always start off with a classic, which is not the cheapest option, but sorry, the Adidas ones. They're classic, right. They look good, and because they're kind of like nylon-y, I think they wash and wear quite well, as opposed to like the cotton ones. You know.
Yeah, so I really don't know where I'm going to start. Part of me is like, you know, just go for like a grey sort of like vibe, but then I'm kind of like, oh no, just go for it. But I don't know, I'll keep you guys updated.
Yeah,
it's also something where I know if I get one, I'll want more though, which is a real problem. But I eat my hat.
You know what, it happens to the best of us.
I don't know if it's also some sort of like knowledge that like
we're not getting out of here.
We're not getting out of here anytime soon. And I don't get me wrong, every now and then, like, or not even every now and then, I do love to dress up, and like there are days where like I will dress up and like I'm not going anywhere, and I love the act of makeup and getting dressed and whatever. But there are also days where I couldn't give less of a shit, and I kind of want something like that for those days where, like, I was saying this to our mutual friend Faith the other day, like, when you don't get dressed up or make an effort for a little while, it can actually sometimes like not be a great thing, because then you sort of like get in this little funk. So I think those might be the outfits that you reach on a day where you're like, oh, I kind of just want to wear my pajamas, but I will shower and put this on and feel like it's better.
For sure. Yeah, I get what you mean. I mean, you listeners can't see me, but Scarlett can see me right now, and I absolutely look like ET. And nothing I've got on right now matches. I look like a worm, pretty much.
No, but like that is I really like the jumper.
No, this jumper is actually black. I got it from Weekday. You know, hold on, you look shocked, but bear with me. Let me explain the story to you. You know, Weekday, they do really good, like, recycled 100% cotton trackies and whatnot. That's a good place to look.
Okay.
Anyway, I was cleaning the bathroom a couple months ago, and I had this really strong bleach spray, and I got a bit on it, and I was like, oh shit, and it was all black, and then it bleached it, so I had to just go to town. I had to take off the jumper, go to town, spray it back. So now I've got this burn.
It's like a modern tie-dye.
This is tie-dye, but this was completely accidental. I just had to run with it because otherwise. So it used to be black. Now it's like got this copper colour.
Which is quite an unusual, like, black undertone, you know? You wouldn't expect it to go that colour, but it's nice.
Right. Yeah, maybe I should I do contemplate getting the trousers and
doing the same,
But yeah, so that's what, I mean, you were talking about, you know, those days where you just can't bother to get dressed. I'm living through that now today.
It's allowed. It is allowed. We interrupt this broadcast to remind you, go follow us on Instagram, Style Over Substance Pod. Shoot us an email, styleoversubstanceP@gmail.com. Find us on YouTube. Find us on Twitter. We've got all the links on our Instagram. You know what to do. But yeah, so we thought we'd kick off this year with a brand episode, and who else better to do a brand episode on than Saint Laurent? Saint Laurent, formerly known as Yves Saint Laurent.
Well, I think this is a brilliant brand to start off with, because within like European luxury fashion, it's one of the best known. Himself as a designer worked for other brands, was a staple in, you know, last century's kind of fashion movement.
For sure.
And because we've all heard of the brand, very often people don't know the story behind it or the history behind it and its significance in culture. And we previously, when we were talking about the kind of past shows, kind of pre-fall and things, we discussed a lot about Saint Laurent, and we just thought, let's give it a proper episode.
Yeah, and it's also a relatively new label that has firmly cemented itself as like a core label. And I know that has happened with a few other labels in around a similar time, but it just happened so quickly. And like, I myself didn't know even how meteoric his rise was, and just how suddenly quickly it happened. That I think that if you didn't know the story of Yves Saint Laurent, I think you'll enjoy it.
Yeah. I think also the history of this brand goes to show just how much these creative directors kind of move around.
Yeah.
And also, like, as you said, his rise, or the notoriety of the brand, is in part because he had a business partner, which we'll get into, who kind of funded it. He was a businessman. Like, you take Chanel, her operation was funded by someone.
You need those monies.
You do. And I think that's an important part of these mega brands becoming mega brands. You know, we have a lot of up and coming smaller businesses and small brands coming up now, which is completely self-funded, which is amazing. But a lot of these big houses really did get these like financial injections.
And I think there's something probably quite special that comes out of, obviously, yes, it's lovely to have the financial backing, but like when you can operate for your first season, thinking that and obviously we'll get into it, but like he had experience working in a fashion house, so he knew how it sort of worked. But like, you just operate like, because you've got the financial backing, so you don't even have to be like, oh, I really need this to do well, or I'm only going to make 3 pieces and work my way up. You can operate like, no, I'm doing a full collection.
You have the creative freedom to
that's
go
got to
for
be
it.
Really cool. And that's not something that unfortunately happens as often these days, because there's so many people trying to do it, and also like it's not an easy thing to invest in anymore.
I mean, it also goes to show that you have to think about the people that these designers at a certain time in history, they were mingling with people who were artistic and mingling with people who had money, and you had to be in the circle, you know, you had to know people to make these things happen. So
yeah, that's actually a really good point as well, that it made me think of like, artists did tend to run in quite like, and I'm saying artists in a loose term of like designers and artists, they did tend to move in very wealthy circles. I know it now is sort of the phrase of like a struggling artist or something like that, but like back in the day, that was, you mixed with sort of wealthy people, because I guess that's where the inspiration came from, and like maybe you had to be wealthy to want to be an artist. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that reminds me of during the like late 70s and 80s, when you had things like Studio 54. You had like Basquiat, you had Grace Jones and Diana Ross, and they knew, oh God, pop art artist, what's his name? My mind's gone blank.
Andy
Warhol, and they knew each other on a personal level and used to work in each other's warehouses and things like that. And so, you know, as Warhol had his interview magazine, he was able to like get everyone he knew and his friends who were coming up at the time to kind of come up with him. And that's how, it's a very like art kid scene, but interesting story nonetheless.
So should we start with a little bit of history on Yves Saint Laurent, the man himself, or do you want to go with the brand first?
Let's do the man himself.
Okay. Do you want to start with his ridiculously long name?
No, you can do it.
I'm going to butcher it, but his name is Yves Henri Donat. I guess maybe Donat. I don't know. Matthew Saint Laurent. Yeah. So that is Yves Henri Donat Matthew Saint Laurent.
Yeah, really long.
He was born in 1936, and he was naturally quite a creative person. He sort of spent his time being very creative and very much took to the arts at school and whatever. And in 1953, he submitted sketches to a contest, like a design contest, and he won first place. And the awards ceremony was held in Paris. So he stayed in Paris, And then he met the then editor-in-chief of French Vogue, and they saw some of his sketches that he brought to this exhibition, or whatever this like fashion exhibition was.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were basically talking about it. The editor-in-chief of Vogue was very much impressed. And the editor-in-chief of Vogue was like good friends with Christian Dior.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so the reason that this is important is basically that the sketches were very similar to those of Christian Dior. And so I guess that's super impressive, like to have the same sort of sketch skill as somebody who's been in the game at that point for a while and is obviously as famous as Dior would have been then.
And it's the idea of like Dior, he was seen as ahead of his time when he kind of established his couture house, and it was someone else recognizing the talent to push fashion forward in the same way that Christian Dior was able to.
Yeah, definitely. And remember, this has just come after sort of like the new look and all of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's like a real high time for Dior.
Mm-hmm,
and
exactly.
Can I just add, he beat out Karl Lagerfeld to win this like sketch competition. And I don't know if you've like seen Karl Lagerfeld's sketches. Like he can sketch so quickly, and like, I don't know, I love them, but I guess that's because it goes part and parcel with Chanel. But like you see like documentaries or something of how quickly he would just draw out these sketches, and they weren't perfect or anything like that. They were just like, they gave you that like impression,
the essence of it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So basically the editor-in-chief of Vogue, his name was Michel de Brunhoff.
Okay.
He introduced or showed the sketches to Dior, and they were interested in his talent immediately, and he basically became an intern basically there immediately. And so he interned at Dior, and his first year was just spent doing what interns do, mundane tasks, and then slowly but surely he was allowed to make sketches for the couture shows. And with every passing seasons, more of his sketches were accepted by Dior. And then in August of 1957, so he's only sort of probably been at Dior for like 3.5-4 years, Dior basically meets with Saint Laurent's mother to say that he's chosen Saint Laurent to succeed him.
He was very much a protege, sort of.
Yeah. And so like that's like crazy. I've worked at companies for 4 years and I've barely got a promotion.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It was just a more, I suppose, it goes to show the intimacy of
and also like
fashion at that time.
It does just happen. There's that one person who's like outrageously talented and skillful, and they've just got it. And I guess as well, especially if you can work well creatively with somebody, that's like a real, like that's a real moment. But and so very weirdly, that year, Christian Dior died. So I'm not shouting conspiracy, but that year,
he killed him off. That's what I'm saying.
So the reason I said August 57 is that he died in the October. So like not too long after. So like I'm not claiming anything, but you know. And then basically at 21, Saint Laurent was the head designer of the House of Dior.
Yeah,
it's like that is mad.
And it's also, sorry to interject, it's quite like looking at the history of the brand and the man himself and everyone that kind of follows in subsequently, it really goes to show that all this happened in one lifetime. Like we almost like mythologize Christian Dior and YSL and all these people, and it's
you forget that they were alive, like
they were all alive at the same time. and these people knew each other as actual people and not as this like massive conglomerate that we know today. And I mean, don't want to skip ahead too much in the future, but Yves Saint Laurent, he didn't die that long ago, within our lifetime. And like to think that these people lived not just through the war, but through so much turmoil of like the 20th century, and it's like they all knew each other. How weird! It's like a weird revelation of time. But yeah, anyway, carry on.
No, but that's so true. So his first season at Dior went really well. It was received really well, and they think it definitely helped to save the enterprise from some difficulties it was going through. And then I think his time was spent very tumultuously, as in like some collections would be really celebrated. And I imagine that this was like do you remember the pressure that Raf Simons had when he like that first Dior collection? I can only imagine it was so much bigger than that. Like that first person who takes over the named owner of a brand, especially like Dior, and like having this like rise like he did, I bet it was just so like watched and
anticipated
and readily critiqued and all of that stuff. So yeah, it had quite a tumultuous reception, and he had lots of different people wanting to design wedding dresses and all of that stuff. And basically a big thing with Saint Laurent is he had a lot of problems. He had some health problems, he had addictions, and so he had some tricky times and actually resulted in suing Dior. And there was it was a very sad basically end to what could have what was an amazing rise. Imagine even if that happened to me, if I had a job at Dior, it'd be like the most exciting thing. So to be appointed that and be the protege, and then it just suddenly ends so quickly, and that happened really fast as well. This is in 1960, so he's only there for he's head designer for 3 years. That's really not that long, but it was a really pivotal point, I think, in Saint Laurent, but also Dior.
Yeah. So that kind of takes us up to him establishing his namesake brand. So in 1961, along with Pierre Berger, he started his brand, Saint Laurent, YSL, or Saint Laurent. And it was, and still is, best known for its tuxedo jackets and suits for women, which is called le smoking.
Le smoking.
And
which is really forward. We discussed this a little bit on our end of year episode with the Harry Styles and a dress thing. But yeah, I don't, and I was actually watching an old Top of the Pops Best of the 80s thing over Christmas. And I don't know if we just live in a different time, but the men would be wearing such heavy faces of makeup. They would be wearing such bold and crazy outfits because it was just the trend, or it was a new romantics, or whatever movement it was, or even if it was punk, they would be decked out and no one blinked an eye. It was, I don't know if it was a more accepting time, or that I said to my parents when we were watching it, I think it's more of a time where we need a label for anybody. And so it wasn't necessarily an expression of their sexuality or anything like that. It was just fashion.
Yeah, it was especially the 80s, 70s and 80s. I mean, in the 70s, you saw men wearing heeled boots.
Yeah.
Actual high heels.
Yeah.
And in the 80s, as you said, so much makeup, so much glitter, so many tight trousers and pants, open shirts, nail polish. And, you're saying the whole Harry Styles thing. Now we're gasp and horror. I mean, back then people did criticize these fashion trends, but it was celebrated as this innate
creativity or
rebellious nature. Yeah, so that is true. But to give context to the smoking suit or the tuxedo suit,
but that's super fast forward, or that's super the fact that it's an androgynous look for a woman is really futuristic and quite I don't know, again, they were so everyone celebrated it. No one was a suit for a woman.
Well, the thing is, I think people probably did. I mean, the people who probably write the history,
the stiff upper lips.
Yeah, the people who write the history about the success of Yves Saint Laurent and what he did are probably people who were in the fashion industry and saw it for the great thing that it was. So I'm sure there were probably lots of people who didn't like it, but then they just get relegated to the back of history, I suppose. But yeah, just to give context to those listening, to go from Christian Dior, which created this silhouette, this small waist, this big skirt, and was an incredibly feminine brand, you know, lots of embroidery, lots of beading, lots of tulle. He designed Princess Anne's like 21st birthday dress, you know, very romantic in its fashion, to then leave and then be like, no, I'm putting these women in like 3-piece suits, double-breasted jackets, like all black. It's a complete 180 in aesthetics. So that's why it's so different.
But I think he was known for pushing boundaries or being quite forward or modern for the times. Like, I know a lot of his references were like non-European, and he was also not like quite famous for using non-white models, which was actually like not such a common thing. So I think he had this sort of very revolutionary, very very modern mind for
I think,
which is surprising considering he came from, I guess, Dior, that was much more historic.
I think also North African influences like Algeria and Morocco. I mean, we know like the famous Blue House. I believe it's in Morocco. Correct me if I'm wrong. And like Algerian background, it's kind of brought in that sort of influence, and
which was probably never really referenced in like top mainstream fashion, you know.
It would be nice to go back in time and like witness it firsthand, but so that was kind of like the beginnings of YSL and what was happening there. 1963, a man called A.M. Cassandre, he designed the logo at the time, and during the 60s and 70s really popularized this beatnik look, safari jackets, the tight trousers, the knee-high boots. Thigh-high boots, I should say, is what we've seen on the runways recently with Anthony Vaccarello's doing these like patent leather, skin-tight boots with leggings and like pussy bow blouses and things like that. His most famous collections was pop art ones, a Picasso one. We can always remember that block coloured dress, A-line dress, and Ballet Russe, which is kind of a reference on, again, like North African culture, embroidery on these like waistcoats and these big old skirts, which were like emerald green and gold. And so those are his like biggest collections that really come to mind when you think of YSL. And he was like the first big name to encourage ready-to-wear. And the ready-to-wear collection was called Rive Gauche, and it's a reference to the Seine in Paris, the river. And that, as you can imagine, although many of our listeners weren't around at that time, but for like our parents' generation, for example, and you can just appreciate for the fact that before, your things were tailored, made to measure, made to order, and ready to wear allowed you to go into a shop, be like, this is my size, and leave with that thing. And it like helped to democratize fashion in the same way that we see social media democratizes access to fashion and fashion shows and things. You had access to like the latest designs through, or slightly altered designs through cheaper ready-to-wear options. And so his collection really helped to popularize that as well, which is massive when you think of its significance. And then we also have YSL Beauté, which is their beauty collections, which is currently owned by L'Oreal. And they do have a perfume called Rive Gauche still to this day. And a lot of the bags, actually, if you go on their website now, a lot of their bags reference Rive Gauche, which
it's like, it's rather than like, or it's like the Maison, or, you know, like all this stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So during the 80s and 90s, they continue expansion through men's and women's fragrances. And unfortunately, by like 1992, the fashion house was, I don't know why, but it was randomly sold to this pharmaceutical company. I don't know why.
I wonder if that's also like, I don't know if he was in charge of the business, but like, I wonder if that was kind of like a little example of how unwell he was.
Well, I saw an interview with Pierre Berger, and he said that he was doing the business side of things because he was only a businessman, and he was always the fashion creative side of the business, and they never mixed the two. Like they had their own domain and stuff. The thing is, by the time 92 came along, I don't think the brand was doing as well as it was previously, so they probably had to sell it to offload that financial burden or something. So a pharmaceutical company wanted to buy it. In the late 90s, we have our friend again, Elba Elbaz, and he designed 3 collections for YSL. So this is when we start to see these other big names of designers that we know who are still around today, who kind of dip in and out of being creative director at YSL. Anything you want to add so far?
No. Keep going.
Okay. I'm going. 1997. We have Pierre Berger appoints Eddie Slimane, who we all know, as the collections and art director. And he relaunches Rive Gauche Men's, as we said, which is like the ready-to-wear side of the business. But then Eddie Slimane leaves. And right at the end of the 90s, Gucci buys YSL. And they asked Tom Ford, because Tom Ford used to be creative director of Gucci. They asked Tom Ford to basically start designing the ready-to-wear and to also design... And he was designing the ready-to-wear whilst Yves Saint Laurent himself, the man himself, would continue to design the haute couture. 2002 comes along and they close haute couture. So it's a lot of back and forth and things. And one quote, which... I
love this quote. I know what you're going to read.
One quote that he's like famous for saying is that Chanel freed women and I empowered them. And I mean, this is like some real big bull statements, but...
For sure, but it's also kind of true in a lot of ways, because ready to wear is literally huge. Like that's where like high street comes from. Like realistically, obviously it's an imitation of stuff, but like it just was the birth of affordable, readily made clothes for the masses. Which is huge, and probably was like the birth of wanting more than that one dress that you had made. You know, it was probably that, well, I feel we don't have to go to the trouble of like this and that. I can buy like a few dresses, and maybe they're supposedly cheaper than custom made. And
I think also the silhouette, because for those of you who
get rid of that corset,
for those who you understand the significance of Chanel, she gave women looser fitting clothing, and they were more masculine than what they were previously used to.
Yeah, and she basically designed trousers for women.
Yeah, and so that's what he means by she freed women. Obviously, women, we're talking in a very Eurocentric like idea. And he empowered them because the suits that he was making was like tuxedos are really
badass.
Yeah, like really bold, well fitted.
Own one. I would happily own one.
Yeah. They're beautiful, but they're like badass pieces of clothing, as you said.
Yeah.
And when you remember like Jade Jagger, and she used to wear these YSL suits, and it was rock and roll, you know, it was
rock and roll, baby.
You don't like mess around with women like that, and Chanel just does not have that same aesthetic. their string of pearls. But yeah, so I can understand that statement, definitely.
Yeah, for sure. And so like Tom Ford was there a good little while, good little stint, wasn't
he? Yep. But then he left.
Yeah. So there's this sort of starts the revolving door, I guess, of Yves Saint Laurent. So Tom Ford left in 2004, and they brought in Stefano Pilati, who had a much more French image that I think people celebrated over the sort of Tom Ford, probably more American-y or more generic sort of look. And then there were some tumultuous years with Stefano Pilati.
Well, I don't know to what extent it was his fault, but there were store closures during that period.
So this is around the time as well that Yves Saint Laurent's health has totally like disappeared, which was kind of, I think, why the couture sort of stopped for a bit, is he wasn't very well.
No, yeah, that would make sense.
And then he passed away in 2009. No, sorry, in 2008. Sorry. You can't get the year wrong. And so I think that there's either probably a drop or a huge spike in sales when somebody dies for their brand. Like, you know, I think it's either or. I don't think it just stays the same. And they definitely noticed this. And I also like, as much as couture is very much like it eats away money for a lot of companies, it's also the best way to like just get interest, get people excited, to showcase what you can do. And that was like, that's where Saint Laurent started. So I wonder if there was quite a big like, oh, that's beautiful, I can't own that, but there's a very like diluted version in the ready to wear that I can have. So I wonder if that played a role. But yeah, so then there were some store closures like you mentioned, and they were quite big stores. They were in like New York, they were in Chicago, San Francisco, which are huge markets, like, I mean, globally, but also.
And I think the New York one had been around since the beginning of his brand.
Basically like the flagship or whatever you would call it. And then in 2012, Eddie came back. So this is like some huge in and out sort of thing, because in that time as well, like Slimane has just worked with Dior, and so it's some weird sort of like replicating the
very incestuous fashion industry, but we all knew that.
And then so that happens in 2012, that Slimane comes back, and in 2015 announces reviving the couture line, which is huge. That's absolutely huge. But the next year he leaves. Maybe it's all too much, and is replaced by Anthony Vaccarello. And then this just continues basically with
what we see today. Really, the style that we see Anthony Vaccarello put out now is very much based on what Eddie Slimane was doing before. It's really about the tuxes, the rock and roll vibe, the like 70s aesthetic. And I don't know if they're financials, but just anywhere you go, everywhere you go, everyone is after a Saint Laurent bag. There was a lot of like controversy with him changing the typeface of the logo
and rebranding.
The rebranding essentially. I mean, it's still present on the beauty, the older style,
and
but
like clasps of bags
on the details and bits like that. But I mean, it's still, if you go back and look at old pictures of YSL stores, on the front of their stores it used to say Saint Laurent, and it was in a very similar typeface. It's not that different to what it was many years ago.
When I first saw the rebranding, I thought it was a diffusion line. So I thought it was like a mark by mark, something like that. And I didn't really understand that was just, there was no more YSL.
Yeah, I think also because it came at a time when other brands were, you know, going from a serif font to a sans serif font, and everyone was like, everything is starting to look the same, it's starting to look very brand, it's losing its heritage and things. But I think that it works for them. Their stores are like super sleek, head to toe marble.
I think it suits the sort of like rock and roll vibe that it's always had as well.
Yeah,
I just think it's kind of catchier, it's cleaner, I'm on board with it, to be honest.
Yeah. So some of their most popular pieces at the moment are like sac de jour, very structured.
That's been popular for like a decade, I'd say.
Yeah, very much. I wouldn't mind one. They've got some really, I think, cool pieces. Just browsing their website, everything kind of makes sense. Nothing is too like, oh, I could never, where am I going to go wearing
there's nothing
that?
too fussy or... And their accessories have a real range. They definitely cater for the minimalist, but they also have sort of, they don't tend to do it across an entire collection, but even sort of, I guess, their equivalent of a camera bag, they'll often do like the YSL logo with stars on it, or like some sort of like kind of more rock and roll type,
like very glam
going
rock.
Very glam rock. Like they'll definitely do different things like that and be playful in their accessories, but like they're also just really wearable, and they're also a little bit more affordable than the likes of a Dior and a Chanel.
Yeah, definitely. So you can get one of their
using
blazers.
The word affordable somewhat ironically.
You can get one of their blazers for like £1,700, which is a lot of money, but you know, these things just they are really good quality, heavy blazers. And when you compare it to Chanel's like what, £4,000 boucle tweed jackets, it's a big difference in price. But if I had that money and I had somewhere to go, I'm getting one.
Yeah. But so like there's definitely been sort of a lot of rise and falls in the brand's history, but what brand doesn't have that? And I would say that we've just definitely, I think the rebranding, I know it was quite controversial at the time, but I definitely think it's helped it. It's made it fresher. I think it's made it appeal to the young, which maybe it didn't before.
Definitely. I think it's a brand now for people who maybe, you know, those like younger kids out there who have a lot of money who buy into like the Dior Jordans, and they're more into that streetwear level of luxury. I think Saint Laurent is that brand that if they were going to dress up in, I
swear they've got sweatshirts and stuff like that as well.
Yeah, they do.
Like, you know,
they do really cater.
But they were kind
audience.
Of doing that a little bit before other people. I feel like they were also a lot more there with the canvas tote than like, I know that's just like Dior's territory now that they've got their like
the woven
embroidered shopper. But like you said, those Rive Gauche bags, I feel like those have been around for a really long time, and it's still going strong, and it's still there, and it's definitely like a great alternative to having something like that that's not Dior. Don't get me wrong, I do want one of those Dior bags, but
sponsor us, Dior.
Someone send me money.
Yeah.
Have you seen that on TikTok? It's literally someone who's made a song that's like, does someone want to send me some money?
But yeah. So any last thoughts on the significance and impact of the man himself or the brand? What are your parting words?
I just think he's just a very one of a kind. He's one of those people that is, you know how like there are some of these designers where they could be you or I, they could be just anybody, but he was just like a bit of a star. And I think that it can really tell from his story, and the fact that there's been quite a lot of films sort of about him, and they've really tried to depict his story, and there's some kind of interest with like his sort of love life with his partner, but then they weren't in love and they were still partners and all of that stuff. I just think he was, I don't know, he did a lot for fashion in a very short space of time.
Yeah. And in fact, the interview that I watched with Pierre Berger, and he actually summed it up really well. He said that Yves Saint Laurent was born with a nervous breakdown.
But you know
so
what, like sometimes
you're
the
either
best
crazy,
people are.
exactly. You're to be a designer or a creator,
You have to be
or
mad.
an artist, you have to be crazy. And that's the sort of person he was. Yeah.
I mean, well, luckily he found that, you know.
Yeah. So that's our episode for YSL Saint Laurent. Next week we'll be doing a topic. Are we? Yeah.
I think so. We need to decide it.
And yeah, but thanks for listening, guys. If you have any other brands that you'd like us to kind of tackle and talk about, let us know. And we really hope that you have a good 2021.
Come on, guys. We got this.
It's not really up to us, is it?
But we've got this. We can do it.
We can do it. Thanks again, guys. I've been Mim.
I've been Scarlett.
See you next week.